Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a moment in life when you realize that people treat you exactly the way you allow them to. Every single day you are teaching the world how to treat you, not with your words, but with your boundaries, your energy, and your self-respect. You may not notice it, but every time you tolerate disrespect, every time you stay silent when you should speak, every time you make excuses for someone else's bad behavior, you're giving permission for the world to walk over you. And it's not just about psychology. It's neuroscience, it's biology, it's survival. The human brain has evolved around feedback loops. When you allow someone to overstep, your brain, especially your limbic system, interprets it as a signal of powerlessness. The prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for decision-making and self-control, then starts to adapt to that powerlessness. It rewires itself to normalize it. You literally start to build neural pathways that accept being disrespected as part of reality. That's why it becomes harder and harder to stand up for yourself the longer you stay silent. You're not just losing confidence, you're reprogramming your brain to believe that you don't deserve respect. Now think about that for a second. Every time you bite your tongue, every time you smile when you want to scream, your brain's chemistry is learning that submission is safety, that silence is survival. But it's not. It's self-destruction disguised as peace. Because here's the hard truth. If you don't protect your boundaries, no one will. I remember once working with a man who was one of the most brilliant engineers I'd ever met, genius-level intellect. But he was miserable. I asked him why, and he said, because I'm the guy everyone dumps their problems on. I fix everyone else's mess, but no one respects me. He wasn't exaggerating. At work, his boss would hand him projects no one else wanted. His coworkers would call him on weekends for help. Even at home, his family took advantage of his time and patience. He was exhausted. When I asked him why he allowed it, he said, because I don't want to upset anyone. That sentence hit me like a punch, because that's what millions of people live by, the fear of upsetting others while being quietly destroyed themselves. And so I told him something he never forgot. If you don't learn to make people uncomfortable, you'll spend your entire life being uncomfortable yourself. And that's exactly what too many of you are doing. You think being nice will protect you. You think being agreeable will get you respect. You think being silent will earn peace. But niceness without boundaries is manipulation. By others, of you. You're not being kind, you're being controlled. You see, neuroscience shows us that chronic submission, constantly saying yes, constantly prioritizing others' comfort over your own, leads to heightened levels of cortisol, the stress hormone. This chemical eats away at your clarity, your sleep, your focus. Your brain literally starts running in survival mode, scanning for social threats, avoiding confrontation like it's physical danger. Your immune system weakens and your creativity drops. Your energy fades. So when I tell you not to let anyone walk over you, I'm not just talking about emotional resilience. I'm talking about protecting your biology. Because weakness isn't just a mindset. It's a physiological pattern reinforced every single day you refuse to draw a line. Let's take this deeper. Think of your self-respect like an immune system. It's invisible, but it protects everything, your mind, your time, your goals. The moment you stop defending it, you open the door to infection. Toxic people, manipulative friends, abusive relationships, exploitative workplaces, and once they enter, they don't leave easily. They drain your energy, your confidence, and your sense of identity. Have you ever noticed that people who walk over others always seem to find the same kind of people to exploit? That's not coincidence, it's pattern recognition. Predators, whether social, emotional, or psychological, are experts at sensing weakness. It's not mystical, it's chemical. When you're uncertain, your tone changes, your body language shifts, you avoid eye contact, you hesitate before answering. All these microsignals tell the other person, you can push me, and once they see that, they do. But here's the beautiful thing, the opposite is also true. Confidence emits a biological signal too. A steady gaze, a calm tone, a refusal to explain your boundaries, that's strength. And it rewires not only how others treat you, it rewires how you treat yourself. Because self-respect at its core is the daily act of teaching your nervous system that you are worthy of peace. worthy of space, worthy of saying no. Now, some of you were raised in environments where saying no wasn't allowed. Maybe you grew up in a home where every time you spoke up, you were punished. Maybe you had parents who modeled self-sacrifice as virtue. Maybe society told you that being humble meant being silent. That's not humility, that's conditioning. And conditioning can be reversed. But only through conscious confrontation with your own fear. The amygdala, the fear center of your brain, doesn't know the difference between danger and disapproval. When you think, if I say no, they'll be upset, your brain interprets that as, if I say no, I'll die. That's why you freeze, why your heart races, why your palms sweat. But the more you confront that fear, the more you rewire your amygdala to calm down. That's called exposure-based neuroplasticity. It's the science of becoming fearless through practice. So every time you set a boundary, you're literally teaching your brain that saying no is safe. You're reclaiming neural territory that's been hijacked by fear. And the more you do it, the more your brain starts to crave that safety. Not the safety of silence, but the safety of strength. I once met a woman who spent 20 years in a toxic relationship. She said, I didn't even realize how much I'd lost until I left. Her voice had tremors, not from sadness, but from awakening. She said, it's like I finally remembered who I was. You see, when someone walks over you long enough, you forget your own shape. You forget what it feels like to take up space. But once you stand up, once you say enough, you rediscover something ancient inside you. Self-respect. And self-respect, once found, is not negotiable. And here's what most people don't realize. When you stop letting people walk over you, you will lose people, but you'll gain yourself. You'll lose manipulators, freeloaders, emotional vampires, people who only love the version of you that was convenient for them. But you'll gain your sanity, your focus, and your authenticity. It's funny how people respect strength even when they don't like it. The moment you start standing up for yourself, the same people who used to take advantage of you suddenly call you cold or selfish. But that's just the sound of boundaries being established. Let them talk. You're not here to be liked. You're here to be respected. And respect, my friends, is earned through clarity, not compromise. You teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate. When you walk into a room, the world is silently reading your confidence like a signal. And that signal determines everything. Your opportunities, your relationships, your success. I've studied this for decades, not just in boardrooms and labs, but in the way the human nervous system responds to dominance and submission. Assertiveness triggers a specific hormonal response, a balance between testosterone and serotonin that increases your perceived competence and authority. People can feel it even before you speak. That's why certain individuals command attention the moment they enter a room. It's not arrogance, it's alignment. And yet most people spend their lives dimming that signal, shrinking, apologizing, explaining, softening their edges just to keep others comfortable. But you were not put on this earth to make everyone else feel at ease. You were put here to live with power, purpose, and precision. Power isn't about control, it's about responsibility. It's the ability to say, this is where I stand, and mean it. It's about protecting your time, your peace, and your mental energy like sacred currency. Because that's what it is. Every minute you waste on people who drain you is a minute stolen from your mission. Every apology you make for your boundaries is a deposit into someone else's comfort account and a withdrawal from your own potential. And here's the tragedy. People who constantly let others walk over them often justify it as kindness, but in truth, it's fear wearing the mask of virtue. They confuse pleasing others with purpose. But you can't please your way to power. You can't shrink your way to respect. You can't play small and expect big outcomes. You want to know why? Because the universe doesn't reward passivity. Life responds to conviction. When you stand tall, when you speak with authority, when you carry yourself with unshakable self-respect, even before the world understands you, it adjusts to you. That's the invisible power of certainty. And certainty doesn't come from others agreeing with you. It comes from you agreeing with yourself. You cannot expect people to value your worth if you haven't decided what that worth is. The moment you define it with clarity, with action, with standards, everything changes. You begin to walk differently, you talk differently, you think differently. You stop over-explaining, you stop seeking approval, you stop negotiating your worth for a temporary seat at someone else's table, because when you know your value, you build your own damn table. And the people meant to sit with you will find their way there, not because you beg them to stay, but because your energy demands alignment. Now let me tell you something few people are willing to hear. When you stop letting people walk over you, you will be misunderstood. Some will call you arrogant, some will call you difficult, and others will quietly distance themselves because your strength reminds them of their weakness. But that's okay. You're not supposed to fit into the version of the world that benefited from your silence. True growth means shedding the skin of who you used to be. The agreeable one, the accommodating one, the one who took pride in endurance instead of self-respect. That version of you had to exist so that you could learn the lesson, but it cannot go where you're heading next. You see, in neuroscience, there's a concept called synaptic pruning. It's the brain's way of cutting off old neural connections that no longer serve you, making room for stronger, more efficient ones. The same thing happens in life. When you decide not to let anyone walk over you anymore, life starts pruning relationships, habits, and patterns that don't belong in your next chapter. It's not loss, it's optimization. It's your mind and spirit recalibrating to a higher level of self-respect. So if you've ever felt lonely during your growth phase, understand this. You're not being abandoned, you're being refined. The crowd you lose when you grow stronger was never your crowd to begin with. I remember mentoring a young entrepreneur who was brilliant, ambitious, and talented, but had one fatal flaw. He was a people pleaser. Every decision he made was influenced by someone else's opinion. He changed his business plan based on what his friends thought. He'd underprice his services to avoid making clients uncomfortable. He'd agree to partnerships he didn't believe in because he was afraid of confrontation. When I told him to raise his prices and stop explaining himself, he panicked. But what if they think I'm selfish, he asked. I said, they already do. The difference is now you'll actually get paid for it. 6 months later, he called me. His business had tripled. Not because he became smarter, but because he stopped apologizing for his value. He learned the hardest truth of all. You can't lead, succeed, or build anything worthwhile if you're too scared to offend the mediocre. And that's what most people never understand. The world is not run by the smartest, the nicest, or the most deserving people. It's run by those who have the courage to say no. That's not acceptable. The courage to draw lines in the sand and defend them. Now, I'm not talking about aggression. I'm talking about assertiveness. The calm, grounded power that comes from knowing you don't need anyone's permission to exist as you are. Aggression is insecure energy. Assertiveness is self-mastery. It's the difference between shouting, "Respect me," and quietly being someone impossible to disrespect. You can tell when someone's mastered that state. Their presence speaks before they do. They don't rush to fill silence. They don't justify their decisions. They don't compete for attention. They've transcended the need to prove anything because they already know who they are. That's real power. And I'll tell you, from both neuroscience and experience, that kind of inner power radiates. It changes your posture, your tone, your rhythm of speech. It changes how your brain processes social interaction. Studies on embodied cognition show that when you stand tall with open posture and firm grounding, your brain begins producing hormones that reinforce confidence. Your thoughts literally become stronger because your body is signaling certainty to your nervous system. So yes, not letting people walk over you isn't just emotional, it's physical. It's the art of aligning your body, brain, and boundaries in one unified signal that says, I am not available for disrespect. You know who struggles with this the most? Good people, kind people, empaths, people who genuinely want peace and harmony. They think saying no makes them bad. But I'll tell you the truth, good people who can't say no become exhausted people. And exhausted people become resentful. Resentment is the poison that kills kindness. So if you want to stay kind, protect your boundaries like your life depends on it, because it does. Let's talk about that for a moment. Life. Because the cost of letting others walk over you isn't just emotional discomfort, it's your lifespan. Research from Stanford and Harvard has shown that chronic stress, the kind caused by lack of boundaries and constant people-pleasing, increases your risk of cardiovascular disease, weakens your immune system, and accelerates cellular aging. You're literally dying faster to keep others comfortable. So when I tell you to stand up for yourself, I'm not appealing to your ego, I'm appealing to your biology. You can't build longevity in a life filled with silent suffering. There's another angle to this, leadership. Whether you run a company, a family, or just your own life, leadership requires clarity of boundaries. The best leaders are not the ones who say yes the most, but the ones who say no with conviction. They protect their standards because they know that what you allow once becomes the new normal for everyone watching. Every time you tolerate disrespect, your team learns it's okay to disrespect you. Every time you overlook laziness, you teach others that mediocrity is acceptable. Every time you apologize for doing what's right, you reinforce weakness as policy. Strength isn't cruelty, it's clarity. And clarity, ladies and gentlemen, is one of the rarest currencies on this planet. Most people live in confusion, confused about who they are, what they want, and what they will no longer tolerate. That's why the world is filled with noise, conflict, and exploitation. Clarity ends that. Because once you're clear, you can't be manipulated. I want you to think of the last time someone crossed your boundary. Maybe they disrespected your time, your trust, your body, or your dreams. You felt it immediately, that sting, that unease, that internal voice whispering, this isn't right. That voice is your intuition. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. But instead of listening, most people rationalize it away. Maybe they didn't mean it. Maybe I'm overreacting. No, you're not. Your intuition is your brain's pattern recognition system, picking up subtle cues your conscious mind can't yet articulate. It's trying to protect you. When you ignore it, you're betraying yourself. And the human mind cannot thrive in self-betrayal. Every act of silence when your soul wants to speak, that's betrayal. Every fake smile when your spirit is breaking, that's betrayal. Every time you say it's fine when it's not, that's betrayal. You're teaching yourself that your truth doesn't matter. And when your truth doesn't matter to you, it won't matter to anyone else either. So you must decide right here, right now, that your peace, your respect, and your time are non-negotiable. That doesn't make you hard, that makes you healthy. When you stop letting people walk over you, something beautiful happens. Your standards rise and so does your life. You start attracting people who match your energy instead of those who exploit it. You stop chasing validation and start commanding it through your presence. You stop begging for opportunities and start creating them. Because here's the secret, the universe mirrors your self-respect. Whatever you believe you deserve, it will send you people, experiences, and outcomes to confirm it. If you act like a doormat, life will hand you muddy boots. But if you walk like a king or queen, not in arrogance, but in grounded certainty, life will align with that vibration. But it takes courage. It takes facing the uncomfortable truth that you trained the world how to treat you, and only you can retrain it. I once worked with a CEO who built a multi-million-dollar company, but couldn't look his board members in the eye. They steamrolled his decisions, questioned his judgment, and treated him like an intern in his own empire. He was brilliant, but broken inside. When we dug deeper, I discovered he'd grown up with a father who never let him speak. Every time he tried to express himself as a kid, he was shut down. So his brain learned speaking up equals punishment. Decades later, that same wiring ran his company. He wasn't being dominated by his board. He was being dominated by his past. That's what unhealed boundaries do. They become invisible strings controlling your adult life. Once he faced that truth, everything changed. He started speaking up. He fired the manipulative ones. He reclaimed control. And you know what happened? His company doubled in growth within a year because his energy shifted. Energy is contagious. Weakness spreads, but so does strength. When you walk in self-respect, the whole room feels it. People listen differently. Negotiations tilt in your favor. Relationships deepen. Opportunities appear. Why? Because the world responds to clarity and confidence. Always has, always will. So if you're tired of being overlooked, underpaid, or disrespected, the answer isn't to beg louder, it's to stand taller. You can't beg for respect and expect to receive it. You command it through the way you live, through the standards you enforce, through the boundaries you never apologize for.